Hi all, happy Sunday and welcome to this, our podcast. I'm so pleased to be talking to you again. I really hope you've had such a wonderful week and you're really looking forward to the week ahead. So last week I spoke about, the responsibility that we can all take for our own personal finances and how knowledge is power. And I just wanted to follow up on that and try and share with you some of my thinking about what's going on at the minute in particularly say the UK economy, but I think it works actually and is quite transferable to if you're thinking about the global economy as well. And one of the two things that I really wanted to think about were, well, actually it's three: inflation, interest rates, and the looming recession that we've got. And I feel like it's quite a tricky time that we're in at the moment, because usually we're dealing with one of these things. Either we have high inflation and then we've got the Monetary Policy Committee in the UK that adjusts interest rates to deal with that, or you've got recession and then we're trying to deal with that impending recession. Whereas at this moment in time, we've got high inflation, which we're all feeling the pressure from, the cost of living crisis, we call it here in the UK, and I know kind of globally inflation is a big problem. And then we've got the Bank of England warning us that we are going into a recession, and we've had the first quarter of an economic slowdown here in the UK, and that is set to continue. And this got me thinking, because typically when you have high inflation, what we've seen is what would usually happen in the UK. We have the Monetary Policy Committee, and their job is to try and keep inflation within a target range, and really we're aiming for 2% inflation, because you still want some healthy inflation in your economy. You don't want inflation to be zero. You do want some inflation, and the UK have decided that what they will aim for is 2%. So what the role of the Monetary Policy Committee is to assess what's going on and then determine what the interest rate should be in an attempt to try and keep inflation or move inflation towards that 2%. And at the minute, we're obviously very far away from that. We're up in like 10% inflation. And that's why interest rates have been increasing. And we've seen the biggest increase in interest rates in the UK recently, up to 3%. And what the aim of that is to try and stop people from spending. You put interest rates up, it means that credit is more expensive. So people may think twice before taking out credit to buy things. And also you get a better return on saving your money. So when interest rates go up, you tend to see that a lot of banks will put their interest rates up on savings. And that is then to encourage people to save and not spend. And the impact of that then is that demand for goods, services, all the things that we like to buy, that goes down. You may find people who would ordinarily want to buy a particular thing may hold off and wait because they feel like they can save their money when interest rates go up. And so when you have demand for goods and services going down, it means there's less people wanting to buy things, which means that prices fall. Because what we tend to find is that when you've got lots of people wanting to buy lots of things, then prices get pushed up, because you have typically more people trying to buy things than we have goods and services available, and therefore prices go up. And because they're trying to balance this demand and supply, that's kind of like the basic theory around it. So for us as consumers, you have this demand pull inflation, but you can also have cost push inflation. So when prices are actually going up, as in the cost of goods and materials, like we all read the newspaper reports around the cost of building materials going up, the cost of inputs into some food items going up, which then means that the cost of, say, like foods that are made using those items then going up, and that's cost push inflation. And they feel like the best way to deal with that in the UK, they've determined, is by interest rates. So you put up your interest rates, you try and stop people from wanting to buy as much, and that takes that pressure off then of those prices increasing. And then eventually what you would hope to see is then prices falling down to the 2%, and then the Monetary Policy Committee will kind of use their levers, and the only lever that they have to use is interest rates. That's what the UK has determined is that lever. But then this got me thinking, okay, that's good if you just look at inflation in isolation. But then when you're looking at a recession is then a slowdown in your economy, which means typically that you're producing less. And if you have high inflation, which means demand is going down, and we've got this interest rate impact, which means demand is going down, and your economy is shrinking, then it seems like us tackling inflation is going to have a negative impact on the recession. Because you usually find they talk about, governments spending their way out of recession, because what you want to do is boost demand and boost production and get the economy working again to try and, make sure that it isn't contracting, it's not getting smaller, and actually it's getting bigger. Because obviously a smaller economy, if you've got less demand for goods and services, less demand for big infrastructure projects, it impacts everything. You look at house building, businesses investing in new technologies or new factories or new things, that all takes money, and that's all money going into the economy. But it's also about employment. So when you've got an economy that's growing, your demand for people to help support that growing economy gets bigger. Whereas then when you have a recession and you have fall in demand, contracting economy, actually you don't need to employ as many people to produce the goods and services for that smaller then economy. So then unemployment goes up. And the only thing that I can see is that there is some hope out there from policymakers that a recession with high inflation will mean that as the economy shrinks and as demand shrinks because of that, then actually that also has an impact on inflation, and how then that will also help to contribute to inflation coming down. And then once that inflation is then coming down, then do you then start kicking into spending your way out of a recession? But then you need to make sure that doesn't then have a negative impact on inflation. So it really got me thinking about how these things all interact and what levers we have available in the UK that we use to actually help with the recession and inflation. And it'll be really interesting to see over, I think, the next, I was going to say months, but it could even be year, on how that's going to be dealt with. Because like I say, typically when you're thinking about these things at a very basic level, you spend your way out of a recession, and then to reduce inflation you try and curb spending by increasing interest rates. So those two things don't seem like they fit very well together when you've got recession and high inflation at the same time. But maybe there is a way that a recession then reduces inflation, and then we then start working on how to get ourselves out of this recession. But I just wanted to share that with you, because sometimes I feel like it can help to think about things from first principles, go back to basics, and actually think about the reasons behind things and what it actually means for the economy. And then once we do that, then we can take it that next step and think about, well, what does it mean for us and our own personal economies? Because our own finances and what we do in kind of our households, that's our own personal economies. And we can think about that, which is obviously impacted by the wider economy in the UK and also globally. And we've seen that actually he talks about global recessions, because we've got so many countries that are putting up interest rates all at the same time to try and tackle inflation, but actually the impact that can then have on recession. So these are all things that I'm going to be mindful of. I'm going to keep a watch over to see what's going to happen with the policies in the UK to try and tackle both inflation and recession, and then think about what that means for my own personal economy. And I will continue to share with you guys what I'm thinking. Your situation may be different things may obviously have a bigger or smaller impact on you than they do on us, but hopefully by sharing what I'm thinking about, it will help you then even consider the types of things that you may want to consider for your own finances. So I really hope that kind of whistle-stop tour into a bit of the basics around recession, inflation and interest rates you found helpful. And I will be back, or Jermaine will be back next week to talk to you about something else. We really hope you're well. Look out for the things that we do during the week. Jermaine shares a lot of kind of very current news and thinking during the week, so definitely keep a lookout for that, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.